Hey, how's it going, everyone? It's Mike Yao wanting to do another video here, wanting and hopefully doing so. Yeah, we're still all in self quarantine, and it's a good time to do some of these videos. I'm not getting tons of views, but I'm trying, getting the word out there. Trying to get the YouTube channel going and that kind of stuff. I'll post this on Kickstarter and maybe the website or the Facebook page or whatever for Savage Kingdoms. So today, actually a few days ago, I did the my top five GM prep tips, even before the first die is cast. Top five Game Master preparation tips, even before the first die is cast. So, and I said I would follow it up with another one. The top five GM tips once the dice get rolling is this one. So, my top five Game Master tips once the dice get rolling, meaning, in other words, once you start playing session one. The last one would have been in regards to session zero, as everybody likes to call it nowadays. I think it's a good term. It's where you kind of get together for your first game and you talk about what sort of campaign you might expect, what sort of stories the game master might be wanting to tell, or asking the players what he or she what they might be interested in seeing or engaging with, what kind of adventures, that sort of thing, what kind of themes and that sort of thing, what kind of characters does he expect, or does he not really care, or she. So yeah, that was what the last video about. That's session zero. Back in the old days, we didn't really call it that, but we did it. I don't think we really called it that. We just called it getting together and creating characters and talking about stuff. So this video is about session one and going forward. So what should you do as a game master once you got your players going and it's like time for the first game? It's time to go in character and tell a good story, a collaborative story. Again, the game master is mainly in charge, though, as he's the director. So that's you, people I'm talking about. People this is mostly addressing, but allow your players to help tell the story too, and I'll get to that kind of stuff in just a second. So my top five GM tips once the dice get rolling. Number one, establish atmosphere. So very important. As a game master, you need to establish what type of atmosphere. So if you decide to, and I've seen this before, if you decide to run a Call of Cthulhu game, you are the keeper of arcane lore. That's the fancy title for the game master. The referee, the dungeon master. It's a cool name, by the way, cool title. Then it is your job to be fairly serious, and I say fairly because there's always room for a little bit of mayhem and silliness, but you don't want it too much in Call of Cthulhu, or in dark fantasy, or in dark science fiction. And you want to maintain sort of a dark setting, dark and fairly serious. You can be even a little quirkily dark because the Cthulian mythos don't really make a lot of sense to mankind. It is quirky, but in a very dark sense, not in a silly, sort of whimsical way. So keep that in mind. It's up to you to kind of bring that in charge. So you as a game master are looked at by the players as sort of the director, sort of the captain on the field. So if you're being silly in a serious game, they're going to be silly too, almost certainly. There might be one or two really diehard Cthulhu player, and I'm using the Cthulhu example still. Players that might be like, come on guys, listen, and sort of bring it down. But normally it's really up to the game master. Having said that, yes, it's good. Everyone should have a buy-in, what we call a buy-in. Everybody's kind of buying into what sort of game that you're playing, what kind of stories you're trying to tell. So yes, in a way, everybody's kind of responsible for that, but ultimately it's up to the game master. So if you're doing a serious or serious fan, I tend to run pretty serious fan. I'm not a big fan of like whimsical fantasy. And I have a good theory for that. If you run pretty serious heroic stuff, my theory is that comedy will happen. Light moments will happen regardless. If you run a really whimsical light game, that's totally fine. Make sure you are whimsical, but just know that those campaigns in general, they get stayed after a few sessions. This is just a little word of advice, because the fact that the silliness and whimsy is already kind of there, just for the fact that friends are getting together to game. But if you can maintain a light, whimsical fantasy story for a plethora of sessions, then more power to you. I often don't see it work, but you can do it. I mean, but speaking of which, going back to what I was saying, so if you do want to run a whimsical game, then make sure you yourself are a little whimsical. Not only the characters that you play, the NPCs that you portray, but also and perhaps in your narration techniques. Be a little lighthearted and silly, and just, you can tell the Monty Python jokes if you want, and they could probably even be in character depending on the world that you're doing, and the Princess Bride jokes, because if it is a modern day setting where those two movies, the films actually exist, then by golly, the quotes would still exist as well. So if it's whimsical and silly, then make sure you do that. If you're running fantasy, what we call a beer and pretzels sort of version of Dungeons and Dragons or Savage Kingdoms or whatever, particularly Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is definitely set up as kind of beer and pretzels. You can get some serious deep role playing. I have many times, and many people have, but if you really look strictly at the rules, it's really kind of beer and pretzels, and that's fine. That's fun. It's friends getting together. You're having some snacks, maybe drinking a beer or two, depending on your age or desire, and you're having fun. You're doing some light to moderate role playing, but people are cutting jokes, and you're having a good old time, and that's great. Those can be a lot of fun. But just know that if you're trying to do a more heroic, serious, or dark game, then it's on you as the dungeon master to do that, to sort of bring people the way you narrate, sort of be dark and serious. Use terminologies, choose adjectives in particular that are descriptive of the setting and the mood. Use the term dark and gritty, like I just used, or serious or grave. Grave is a good word. Baleful. Try to throw in those terminologies a lot, and don't use a lot of modernisms. I know this goes into other videos I've done where when you describe things, try not to very often describe something as the size of the Empire State Building, or the size of a grand piano if it's back in the Dark Ages. Even though that lets the players know how big that is, but it's kind of like it defeats the purpose for narration for the story. So try to describe things almost more like how they would be to the characters. It's as big as a horse, a war horse. It's as big as Lord von Glanovich's castle or something. But anyway, so establish atmosphere, whether that's serious, whimsical, light, dark, somewhere in between. Or sad. If it's a serious session and it's sad, someone has passed away, you want to do that. Pauses and serious notes, shake your head some and sigh, and just let the weight, the melancholy of the situation kind of take hold. So, yeah. And you can use your Game Master screen. This is kind of a bonus thing. It's not one of the 5 I have written down, so this is kind of a bonus one. But it goes with atmosphere in a way. So some people like to use a Game Master screen or a Dungeon Master screen. Other people do not. Back in the olden days, back in the 70s and 80s, probably almost all of us, I'd seen 1 or 2 Game Masters that didn't use it, but 90% of Dungeon Masters, Game Masters use the Dungeon Master screen or Game Master screen. I still use it. The main reason I like it is I like to have the charts on there. I don't like to barricade myself away from people. In fact, the opposite. I'm an actor. I like to actually interact with people. So I actually get why some game masters do not like the screen, because they feel like they're kind of blocked away from the characters and they can't interact. My personal taste is that I can still do that with a screen. I like to use the lower one now, the 8.5 inch, the landscape one, instead of the profile, the longer ones, taller ones. So that helps a little bit. So you can interface and some, with the other players, but still kind of hide your notes and your dice rolls if you need to do that, in your maps and whatever it is. NPC stat cards. You might have index cards with player character stats on it, or the NPC stats. I don't really do player character stats personally much anymore. I trust the players to kind of deal with that. I'm also pretty decent at keeping track of a lot of that in my head, so I mostly kind of let that slide. But NPC and session notes, I definitely jot down a few of those to cue my memory, or to write down the name of an NPC that I came up on the fly, or maybe even a couple stats or whatever. So that's a side note. That's 1B to point number 1. 1B is the a freebie bonus material is the Game Master or Dungeon Master screen, whether to use it or not. If you don't, some people again like not to use it because they like to be there and interface with their fellow players more. Problem is, then you expose your notes. Most people you can trust not to really look, but they're, they might slip and go, "Wow, I didn't really mean to see those stats," or "I didn't really mean to see that dice roll." And knowing that he just hit me with that big giant club means that he has at least a +7 modifier, because so you'll have the tendency to do that stuff. So with the screen, you can still interface if you need, especially with an NPC you're playing. You can just come over the screen if it's some imposing NPC and just kind of be like, "Really? How dare you?" and just kind of be in their face. If you're playing like a shy NPC, you can use the screen to kind of fall back and just be like, "Oh, my lord, I don't know. They were here a fortnight ago, and they sort of left things in a mess. I don't really know anything about it, and just please spare me. I have a family, and I don't really know what else to say." So you can use the screen for that particular NPC. So yeah, use it not only for your notes and hide people, but you can use it as far as your performance, which I'll get to more in a second. Number 2, engage and listen. Stop, collaborate, and listen. Yeah, Ice is back with brand new rendition. God, if you're old enough to know that, you're as anxious as I am. So engage and listen actually is what it is. Collaborate is actually part of it. That's actually pretty good. But I have literally written down engage and listen. So engage, something what I just talked about, engage with your other players, interface with them, and more importantly, listen. So as an actor, I used to teach acting class. Well, I still do occasionally, but I used to teach them more when I lived down in Atlanta. And one of the things I would always ask a lot of the acting students, the ones that were trying to make it big, is one of the first things I would ask them is, what is the most important tool as an actor? As an actor, a thespian. And only about 10 to 20% would ever get it right. Mostly probably closer to 10, 15. And a lot of people would say legitimate answers. They would say a good speaking voice, or attractiveness, or ability to stay within the moment, ability to project, ability to have great facial expressions, etc., blah, blah, blah. And those are all good answers. However, the number one, and most actors would agree, is that listening. Listening is the number one thing. And the reason I'm using actors as a example is because I'm one, but also I approach tabletop role-playing almost as a performance art. You use a lot of tools as an actor. Whether you're a real actor, a trained actor or not, doesn't matter, because everybody was born basically being an actor. Have you ever pretended to be sick when you were a kid? You were acting. Have you ever pretended, gave little puppy dog eyes to someone so you wanted something? You were acting. So we're all born to kind of do that. So yes, engage and listen. Listen's a big thing. Listen to your players. Listen to what they're saying. They're giving you social cues all the time, or whether they're bored or not, whether they're interested, both in and out of character. If you're lost in a scene, like if you literally are fishing, because we all come through these, no matter how prepared we're as a game master, there will be moments where you're like, yeah, I feel like we're losing energy here, something needs to happen. And you're really not quite sure where to go. Maybe they're not quite going where you want them to be, or maybe you're short on some ideas, on some improv. Listen to what the players are saying, and you will almost pick up on some cool stuff to do. Somebody might, I've had somebody sit back before in the chair and just more or less out of character say, wow, wouldn't that be so crazy if that relic that priest was talking about is actually the long lost thing that you said your character's mother was looking for? That would be cool. And then, as a game master, you're like, that would be pretty darn cool now, wouldn't it? And you can link them together if it makes sense at all. If it's like really far-fetched, then don't force it. Never force it. But if it's a good idea, then yeah, do it. That's a great thing, is when you can link your player character's background stories with present things. That's always a cool thing to do if you can make it work. Or listen to them talk about other things. Also take cues if somebody is on their phone a lot. They're probably, unless you know that they're in an emergency situation, just know that they've kind of dialed out. They're probably kind of boring, and that's fine for a few moments, because somebody else can have the spotlight. But don't forget about them. Check in with them every so often. Do a cut scene, which is something I like to do a lot. If the party separates, which player characters tend to do this in settlements and towns, where it's a little safer, and less so like in the wilderness, although it happens there too, or in the dungeon. So if they separate, which often they will, someone will go visit a temple, someone will go look for something at a shop to try to buy something, someone will go try to trade something, someone will go try to gather information, whatever. Make sure you cut scene if one, spend 5-10 minutes with one character, and then I even sometimes will say cut scene because people are used to cinematography, and it's like they know that there's a wipe or there's a fade to black, and then the next scene is coming up. Or you don't have to say cut scene, you just go right to them and say, so when we left off with your character, what were you doing? Or you could even check in and go, are you still doing the thing you were mentioning? And they'll be like, that cues them to go, yeah, I'm still crafting the object that we were talking about. It's been a few hours. But it gives them a chance to go, actually, no, after doing that, I'm going to go do this now. So you're checking in with the players every so often, making sure everybody's covered. And that's all part of pacing, too, which I'll get to in a moment as well. So engage and listen. Use a good improv technique. So if you, yes, and is the thing that most everybody knows now, meaning to accept and build upon. So if someone goes, hey, Stephen, how are you doing today? I might say, well, I'm doing good. In fact, I'm doing great. I'm been well for the last 22 years, ever since, I met your father and we became friends 22 years ago. So you accepted your name was Stephen in this weird case, and you built upon the story, and now you go back 22 years and you met the guy's father, and that's how you became friends. Weird. But anyway, you say how it works, and that was all done in like 12 seconds. Or you could do yes, but, which is my favorite as a game master. Characters like I'm walking into the bowyer. Do I see any longbows on the wall that he might have finished? Yes, but one of them looks really worn. Yes, but one looks to be a bow that's clearly used from the Orcish tribe that's been an enemy of this settlement for quite a while, or something like that. So you're saying yes, but you're adding some more details to it. And so it's kind of like and, but it's but. In other words, you're almost putting up a complication. But puts up a slight complication, which complication, of course, means story lead, and it also triggers role playing. So people like to hear that, yes, but it's that, and then they're automatically going, cool, how can I overcome that? Or maybe it's one of the Orcish bows, no, I don't want anything to do with it. Or it might be, yeah, I want it to destroy it, or yeah, I want it to augment and make it better and use it for my own or something. And then there's no but. So in improv, you never really, when you're performing improv on stage, you never really want to say no to anything, no but, unless you're Ryan Stiles or somebody like that, or Colin Mockery. They're actually trained so well, and they're so good at improv, they can actually break the rules occasionally because they know each other so well, and so when they're doing that, they're setting each other up to do something crazy. So, but as a DM, you can get away with it more. It can be, are any bows in here that are made? No, there's no long bows, but there appears to be a short bow, or there appears to be a short recurve bow that looks just about as powerful as a long bow. Or no, but the bowyer doesn't look to be that busy right now. He might be able to build you on the next day or two, as long as his apprentice helps him, or whatever. So again, it's adding cool little story details. Yeah, improv technique. So react to what the players are saying, which is kind of what I'm mostly going at. React to them. Engage and listen. Like I said, engage and listen. React is all part of it as well. Don't railroad. So don't, or nose ring is another term. Don't lead people by the nose ring. Do not put them on the railroad and force them to go that one way down the track. They will not like it. It may be at first, because sometimes player characters struggle for like a plot hook, which I personally don't agree with, because I think if you have goals for your character, you'll go on that. You don't have to wait for the GM to feed you something, but that's a whole different thing. So some player characters will, though, be looking for something to do. They're not quite as good about, it depends on the player. Some of them are not as good as kind of initializing adventure hooks or whatever themselves, so they might be looking for stuff. So don't railroad them, but give them clues, give them several rumors. I usually throw out at least 2, 3, 4 rumors based on what they do. Hopefully they go around gathering information. Somebody goes into a temple library, looks into an old tome or book. It almost always gives me a chance to throw out a plot hook, so to speak. Or the old man who stumbles into town, some of these old tropes, the old hermit that comes into town every occasionally to trade the herbs that he finds in the woods. He might have some weird information, probably not always reliable. The local priest, the local town captain of the guard, etc. is usually full of information that you can throw out stuff without railroading people. And that also gives them choices. That gives them choices of adventure. You may have this grand story arc in mind, like I mentioned, I think, in the last video, but don't get too sold on that, because it may not ever happen, or it may happen in a totally different way than you imagined, and that's great. Let that happen. That's called improv. That's called collaborative storytelling, and that's why we're all at the table or sharing the screen together, depending on what unprecedented era of history you are in. So don't railroad or nose ring, but just let it happen. But if you do really want somebody to, you really think this adventure would be really cool, again, don't nose read, but do it in character, do it organically. Let some like NPCs share some things, and yes, there'll probably be a player or two that'll laugh and go, "Well, I guess he really wants us to do this because that's the third person has mentioned it," and that's fine, as long as you keep it sort of gentle and you keep it in character. So, all right, number 3, perform. This is the one that scares a lot of people. Don't be afraid. So, like I mentioned earlier, this to me is kind of a form of performance art. If you have ever performed on stage or on film or whatever before, or even if you're just a singer or a comedian, then you have performed, or you've done speeches before the class or before the town hall or something. In a sense, you have performed. You have done oratory. So don't be afraid. On that note, one tip that I like to give actors and new players is don't be afraid, meaning that commit, one of those big C's of performing. If you commit to a character, if you commit to a role, and you are a little shy about it, or you pull out, then you actually look, if you're worried about looking foolish, you're actually looking more foolish doing that than you are completely committing to it. So, in other words, if you were in an improv scene and somebody said, "Well, you look like Bessie the cow," and then suddenly you're probably going to have to be a cow. Commit to being that cow. Audience is going to love it. If you stay in character and you completely commit to that, and yeah, you may look silly, but you'll look silly in an awesome way. The audience will be like, "Man, that dude is completely committed. That's amazing." If you look uncomfortable, then they're kind of like, they're not buying anymore, and now you look kind of silly. So you look less silly the more you're actually committed, if that makes any sense. So don't be afraid. There's a reason why one of the traits to good actors is being fearless. But on that note, not everybody is like a born thespian. Not everybody's a born performer. Some people are more laid back, or that's just not really their thing. And you can still be a great game master. So do what you can. Meaning that do what you're born with. Everybody's good at something. You may not can do character voices well. You may not can even narrate particularly well. Like maybe you don't choose very good words, but there's something that you're going to be really good at. Maybe you're really good at making the quick rules decisions. Maybe you are good at speaking as a character, but not necessarily as the voice. Like you're good at writing, like composing sentences in your head, as a writer would. Most writers probably aren't particularly good voice actors. Some are, but they're both an art, but they don't necessarily translate. They're pretty different. So yeah, do what you can. Play to your strengths. In other words, that's the other note that I have next to it. Play to your strengths, and everybody has them. You might think that you don't, but you do, or you wouldn't be game mastering, right? So yeah, like play to your strengths. You can't do the character dialects and the accents, then don't worry about it. But in that case, I would say narrate well. Make sure you narrate well. And you can also narrate in the third person. Instead of making a character speak in the first person, you can narrate that he says in the third person. That's a lot of role-playing dungeon master, books like that support role-playing. They'll say that's kind of a no-no, and it sort of is, but if that's literally all you can do, then do it that way. Do it there. I've seen some GMs, weirdly enough, they can't do any character voices at all. They're almost always monotone, but there's still something about them, or really they have a good even narration delivery, and they still make the game engaging. So do what you can. Play to your strengths. Don't be afraid. Perform. Number 4, make quick decisions. All right, so this applies to both in character and out of character. So in other words, rules and making decisions for NPCs, particularly in combat. Make quick decisions. Not like speedy, ridiculous, over the top. You don't have to be speedy. It's not, okay, the guy goes over there and spends a second, you're there, what are you doing next? But don't drag the game down. So be pretty quick and decisive. I said in the last video, if you're not sure about a rule, I allow myself 10 seconds to look it up or make it a choice. I would say you might even go less if it's like in combat, like 5 seconds, because then you can always go back later after the session and actually look up the rule if it even exists, and then see if you got it right. 75% of the time, I bet you got it right. You actually, if you study the rules well enough, based on the last video I mentioned, study the rules, read the book, because it's all a lot of it's going to stick in there. So you don't necessarily need to refer to it during the game. If you could do it quickly, great, but most people can't. And people that have the electronics claim they can scroll and find it. No good. I have literally beaten almost everyone with a hardcover book. I usually will find something 90% of the time quicker than the person on the app. Guarantee. If you want to challenge me, let me know. All right. Now I'll probably get burned. So make quick decisions about rules. And also, if you're, as a game master, if you're playing an NPC, particularly in a combat scene, make decisions very quickly. Make decisions. It's the NPC turn, whether it's an ally or a monster or an enemy. Have them make their choices pretty quickly. Don't drag the game down. So if you're asking your players to be pretty quick, which I do, I like to kind of make combat as visceral and quick as possible without completely spazzing out. But I like to put a little pressure, good-natured storytelling pressure on the player characters and I'll remind them narratively too, like, all right, Goblin's bearing down to you. He's got his spear, and he's like, man, it's all in your face. And so what are you doing? Now, sometimes it will prompt someone to go. I've had this happen, like, oh, well, dude, the goblin just took his action. Is he, like, doing another one? It's like, did you? And I'm like, no. Just because he took his action doesn't mean he's not doing anything. He's still, a spear is, like, in his face. And this will usually prompt people. They'll kind of pick up on the energy and go, yeah, that's true. That is what's happening. So I might need to try to disarm him, or I might need to try to do this spell on him, or I might need to try to tumble away from him because I don't think I can deal with that. I'm wounded or whatever. So make quick decisions for your NPCs as you would expect your PCs to do, and quick rules decisions. Last thing, number 5, pacing. Pacing, big thing in film and novels, particularly, and storytelling in general. So why wouldn't it be in collaborative storytelling / gaming, right? So pacing, make sure you're aware of ebb and flow. You're aware of upbeats and downbeats. If you don't know what that is, it's just usually a fancy title for if you're a roller coaster, your upbeats are your top of the hill, and your downbeats are kind of the lower part of the hill. Or a downbeat sort of plays off of something, goes down off of something, but also may set up something, may set up an upbeat. In fact, I've used a roller coaster example as a good idea, particularly a lot of modern roller coasters. They tell a story in and of themselves. Some roller coasters start off like launch roller coasters, and suddenly you're like, oh my god, here we go. And then there'll be a moment where it slows down, and maybe it even relaunches at some point, or it even relaunches a second time or a third time, or it goes through a series of loops, and then suddenly you calm down a little bit, maybe go through some. So yeah, look at a roller coaster as far as storytelling goes. Now, granted, most of them it's mostly going to skew towards action and swiftness with a roller coaster, but still, a general example would be is a roller coaster as far as pacing goes. So yeah, if you spend an hour on a fairly slow scene, and by the way, when there's a downbeat or a slow moment pacing wise, that doesn't mean it's boring. There should be content there. That just means that maybe some serious dramas going on, some conversation, counsels going on. Someone may be grieving a fallen party member or NPC. So don't be afraid to not let that play out. And you can take social cues off your players. If you see that they're kind of like, okay, we've had enough of the funerary scene, then that's probably an obvious cue to maybe kind of move on. But if they're super engaged in it and they're coming up with cool ideas and they're like completely into it, then yeah, you can let it run for a while. But even then, still be careful, not let it go super long with certain things. And the same with upbeats, action scenes. A lot of modern movies they get knocked for this, and I largely agree. It's just action, and it's like. That could be cool to a degree, but then you come out of the cinema and you're like, oh my god, I'm like so tired, and a lot of it didn't even sit and couch in your mind because you didn't have any downbeats, you didn't have any downtime where the characters were reflecting about what was going on or discussing what was going on. So yeah, just be aware of that. Make sure the pacing is really nice, and I tend to end on a cliffhanger, actually, in my game sessions most of the time, if it'll work, an upbeat a cliffhanger. And then if there's a natural moment for a downbeat ending, literally a fade to black as people go to sleep or something, I'll do that too. But I try to end on a cliffhanger, but it doesn't always work because you shouldn't necessarily force it. So yeah, pacing, just like a good film or novel, make sure you're aware of your pacing and you'll be good. And again, it is mostly on you, but the players will help along with the pacing too. I mean, if you're dragging too much, somebody will be like, all right, and they might even be nice about it without saying, they'll be like, all right, so anyway, I'm going to do, you can usually kind of get the verbal and social cues off your players if they've had enough of the same scene or whatever, or your long descriptions. So don't go over long with your descriptions would be sort of an extra little added note to that. So, all right, well, that was it. That was my top 5. That was about 30 minutes, which is about what I was looking for. 5 minutes each, roughly, whatever. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you guys made it all the way through. And thanks. Subscribe and share and all that YouTube-y stuff. And I will talk to you guys again soon. Stay safe and stay sane. Bye. Later.